It should be no surprise that live service is a dirty word among gamers, especially in the gaming space, where you're just front-loading games with microtransactions and additional payments, battle passes, season passes, and whatever have you, only to try and make a quick buck every single time. Sony's live service shooter Fairgames has been delayed into next year, insiders suggest. And the thing is that we actually saw Fairgames, I think last year or the year before, I can't remember exactly, and since then very little to no information has actually been given out beyond a heavily disliked trailer on YouTube with this style that they've got going on. And the idea is that Fairgames is supposed to be a heist game, but the thing is that not enough information has been provided to actually give a proper comparison in the actual gaming space, because when you think of heist games, normally you think of Payday, and that's kind of what I would think of as well. I genuinely do believe that Payday is a very good franchise. Payday the Heist was really good. Payday 2 leveled up everything in terms of what Payday 1 was originally doing. Gave us significantly more heists, more quality, and a little bit more variance in between. However, Payday 3 has failed to really live up to what Payday 2 was and feels more like a Payday 1.5, albeit with the online-only component, which was absolutely unnecessary. So there is a space in the market for Fairgames, all things considered. However, the showing of this game has been completely terrible. People don't like the idea. The whole eat the rich mentality just doesn't sound right, and it also has like this really weird feel, especially coming from a publisher like Sony. But let's actually talk about the news itself. Fairgames, the heist shooter from Jade Raymond's new studio Haven, has allegedly been delayed, allegedly being the key word here. Whilst we don't know much about the live service game, as I mentioned earlier, it was expected later this year and is in development for PC and PS5. Keeping in mind that I'm pretty sure Fairgames is going to be selling at 40 USD. It's not going to be a free-to-play title. Reason being is that it kind of fell in line with games like Marathon, which is also an upcoming live service from Sony that is going to be selling for $40, as well as the previously released Helldivers 2, another live service that sold for $40 earlier on when it released in 2024. Giant Bomb's Jeff Grubb revealed during the Game Mess Decides podcast that the release had slipped to 2026. Now, Jeff Grubb, can be a reliable insider that, leaks out this information accordingly. But again, we won't ever truly know nor understand what is going on, what the details are, and just kind of each and everything else in between. And I say that one thing I will say with absolute certainty is that Fairgames, no matter how long the delay is, I don't believe is ever going to be successful, if I'm being completely honest. Because, the rest of this article is going to go into what I'm going to get into in this video, so let's talk about it. So, back in 2023, Sony was planning on 12 live services by 2026, but then cut those numbers completely in half. And so, when you think about live services, you think a game that takes up a lot of your time. But the problem is that only a handful of live services are only ever successful, and they're only successful because there's so many people playing them. Because there's so many people playing them, a portion of those are then willing to then pay money to actually buy the stuff that they're selling, the snake oil, so to speak. But the thing is that if there's 12 live services, which is a lot, by the way, from a single company, you're asking for failure. So, PlayStation Maker is pumping the brakes to focus more on quality, the CEO says. This was in 2023, November 10th, that this was reported. And of course, we have an image of pretty much something that we would see from Marathon moving forward. But yeah. So, shortly announced after Sony acquired Destiny developer Bungie, the PlayStation Maker announced an ambitious plan to launch more than 10 live services by the end of 2025's fiscal year, which ends in April 2026, if I remember correctly. And a year later, clear it's not going to work out, and the thing is that now they're cutting the numbers in half. And this was around the time that Hiroki Tsutoki was temporarily in the CEO seat during this period of time. But yeah, so pretty much they were going to release a ton more live services, and unfortunately the number's been cut in half, keeping in mind that Fairgames was one of those live services. Then we get the cancellation of Naughty Dog's The Last of Us multiplayer game that was in development, and a number of reasons for why this game was scrapped was that it was, so the idea is that either they make the game and leave everyone to consistently develop for this game, like the entire studio is constantly developing for this one game forever and ever, or they stop and they actually focus on single player games. And Naughty Dog made the decision to say, we're not working our entire studio on a single game for years and years that may not even turn a profit, and instead move to just you doing a single player game and using the tech to actually help the single player endeavors that they're doing. And honestly, I think that personally this was a very, very good call from the Naughty Dog studio for actually, canceling it. And I think the person who made the decision in the end was Neil Druckmann. I could be completely wrong about that. It's somewhere in here. Anyway, this was reported pretty much December of 2023. Then we find ourselves in the midst of some interesting information an interesting release, one that I don't think anyone could have possibly seen coming. Well, after its initial viewing, I should say, everyone kind of knew where this was going. Concord. So, Concord gets released, gets unreleased 2 weeks later, pretty much is no longer available for purchase. The servers get shut down because there's barely anyone playing it, and on top of that, Concord Studio is permanently shut down. So Firewalk, the studio that made Concord under the umbrella of Totally Monsters, I think they were called, something Monsters. I can't remember what the original company was that owned Firewalk Studios, but pretty much Sony made the decision halfway through development to say, hey, we're buying you guys and we're going to fund the rest of the game, which cost them somewhere in the ballpark of $200 to $400 million. But because Concord was released and then subsequently shut down 2 weeks later, they had to offer a refund to everyone who purchased the game, and the game was selling for, I think, $40 as well, as of, I could be completely wrong about that, I can't remember exactly, but yeah, effectively that's what ended up happening with this game. So far as a recap, PlayStation tried to release 12 live services, cut that in half when they realized just how unrealistic that is, but also the fact of the matter is that you cannot take up so many people's time at the same time on your own device, because sure, not every game is made for everyone, but how are you going to be able to recoup the cost on many of these titles? Then we have Last of Us 2 getting complete, like the multiplayer for that, or whatever this multiplayer Last of Us thing that was supposed to be, was completely cancelled because Naughty Dog did not want to waste their time pretty much constantly developing for the single game, and they kind of just wanted to focus more on single player titles. Then we get Concord releasing midway through, or I guess past the midway point of 2024, only to find ourselves in a situation where the game gets completely shut down because the game is a complete and utter failure, and they have to offer a refund, and also that puts Sony down the hole about $200 to $400 million. Then we have 2 more live service games that were cancelled by Sony, and these were being developed by Bend Studio and Bluepoint Games. So, Bend Studio was apparently working on a third-person open-world military shooter, whereas Bluepoint was apparently working on a God of War live service game. Now, the odds of the Bend Studio game being a SOCOM is incredibly unlikely, but it's just interesting to say the least. And this was reported earlier this year, in fact, in January. So, reliable source reports that PlayStation had cancelled 2 upcoming live service games from its first-party portfolio. The cancellations affect Bluepoint Games, Bend Studio, and lend further credence to the notion that PlayStation might be scaling down its live service ambitions. And around this time, it's worth keeping in mind that we've had a leadership shift in having Hiroki Totoki and Herman Holtz as co-CEOs before Herman Holtz didn't really step down, but kind of moved away from the CEO position, leaving a sole CEO and just, Herman Holtz still being, the first party man, so to speak. So that was kind of an interesting thing to learn, all things considered, that we were potentially getting a God of War live service. Who knows what that could have been like, but again, keeping in mind that people might not necessarily want that type of thing, and Ben Studio working on a third-person open-world military shooter, that just feels like it's kind of trying to ape what, Destiny has been doing among other things. Then we find ourselves in a spot where midway through last year, and this is a little bit out of order because I've been kind of reporting on each of these, but kind of accumulating all of this together in a way that's in order. But I feel like it's worth mentioning that Marathon's development, which is another live service, is apparently facing issues and was supposed to have been planned, but unfortunately got slipped an entire year. So it was meant to have been revealed earlier on in 2024, but got slipped by over a year because there have been some development issues at Studio Bungie. Keeping in mind that Bungie has had to let go of multiple people because they've also had their own issues with staffing, how money is being turned around, and potentially the fact that they may have shown their figures and numbers and money flow incorrectly to Sony, and as a result, Sony may have made a bit of a unfortunate purchase with Bungie, but we'll have to wait and see how that goes. So to kind of really sum things up, we are now finding ourselves in a place where PlayStation originally had 12 live services that they wanted to release by end of April 2026. Now, since then, of the 12, if we cut it down in half and we have 6, Last of Us multiplayer was cancelled. That's 1. Sony shuts down Concord. That's 2. Sony cancels the God of War live service game and the third-person shooter live service. That's 4. Marathon is having some development issues, so that's the 5th one we're looking at. Fairgames isn't doing too well at the moment, given that it's potentially now slipped to 2026. And we have had the release of Helldivers being the sole survivor that is continually being supported and at the same time is actually being appreciated by the most amount of players as of right now. Many failures to add to the graveyard, yet only one sole success. What does this even tell us about the live service future that Sony was attempting to bring into fruition? And unfortunately, it did not seem to have worked out in any way, shape, or form. So with all that being said, let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comments below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel. I'm aiming for 500 subs by the end of the year, and with all that being said, I do upload every day, so I'll see you guys tomorrow.